Hi everyone, and welcome back to this series on how to do open source investigations from home. I'm Ben and this is part 7, so let's get started. In this episode, we're going to look at how to create a time-lapse with satellite imagery. And a time-lapse is essentially a multiple amount of satellite images over a specific string of time, whether that be over weeks or months or even years, to identify changes on the Earth. And this might be environmental changes, or it might be micro changes, like in a building, or when a building has been destroyed, or when fires have been through an area, or even urban expansion or ships, as we'll see. I've got a couple of examples on the screen at the moment, such as this solar power plant, which is one of the biggest in the world, and we can see how those panels have changed every single day. And another example from the port of Singapore, where we can see the vessels moving backwards and forwards every single day, and we might even be able to identify times when there is less trade, for example, in the port. We can do all of this via a few simple and easy to use resources that are completely free. In the description box below, you'll find links to all of these places, just in case you want to follow them up and replicate these steps as we go through them with the same sort of case studies. But this is a solar power plant in Morocco. It's one of the biggest in the world. It's actually 3 different sections. So we've got this section of solar panels down here, this one, and then we have this one as well, which is quite fascinating because if we go to Google Earth up here, which is the way that we can scroll back in time, we can see here that the layout of the solar panels is different to how they were here. And if we keep going back, we can see how those may have changed. Now, you'll notice that when I go back through the Google Earth imagery that's available here, sometimes it jumps a couple of weeks or a couple of months or even a couple of years. And if we go back to 2016, we can see that there were no solar panels whatsoever. And if we click from 2018, we go ahead a couple of months, we go ahead almost a year, and so you get the sort of idea of what we're looking at with Google Earth imagery. But as we went through in one of the previous videos, we can do this with much more imagery available at our fingertips. So what I'm going to do is use Sentinel Hub to do that. And Sentinel Hub is one of the things that we went through in one of the past videos, where we use that to identify a window of time of one of the images that we geolocated and videos that we geolocated, just using that freely available satellite imagery. So what I'm going to do just in advance is I'm going to open this image up in Google Maps, and I'm just going to pluck my coordinates out of there just by doing a hard press on the location, and we'll see my coordinates pop up down here. And these are the coordinates that we want to get our hands on. So I'll copy those. And what I'll do is I'll open up Sentinel Hub EO browser. You'll find a link in the description below to Sentinel Hub EO browser, and you'll notice that it's a little bit different to the Sentinel Hub Playground that we used last time. Sentinel Hub Playground is very easy to use. It's very user-friendly, whereas Sentinel Hub EO browser is much more advanced and has a lot more different features available to it. One of those features is creating a time-lapse. To create a time-lapse, you do have to have an account with Sentinel Hub, but that's completely free, and you can sign up right here just on the sign up form, and I'll provide a link to that as well. Once you open up the Sentinel Hub EO browser and you log in, you'll notice that you're faced with something that looks a little bit like Google Maps, and there's no satellite imagery view. So what we're going to do to fix that, first of all, we'll go to that location that we pasted in or that we copied in from Google Maps before. Now we can't really see the satellite imagery of that because we have to do a search through Sentinel's database over here of Landsat imagery or the Sentinel-2 satellite system or MODIS or Gibbs system as well. So we'll just use the standard Sentinel-2 satellite system, which is also what we're looking at in Sentinel Hub Playground. And we can either select the panels over here, so these are satellite runs that we can view, or you can just click Visualize on the left tab over there. Now we're a little bit zoomed out at the moment, so we won't be able to see our solar power plant too easily right now. So what I'm going to do is zoom in, and then I'll re-click on my coordinates, and it'll it'll center my view over those coordinates. So we can see the solar panels now, but it's a little bit of a cloudy day. And when we make our time lapse, we want to make sure that we have as least clouds as possible, because otherwise we're not really going to see much. So this is a cloud-free day over the solar power plant, and it looks quite good. So I'll go ahead and start making my time lapse. The time lapse is really easy to make. So all we have to do to create that time lapse is click on this icon over here on the right, which says create time lapse animation. Now we can use this window to center over the area that we want to feature in the middle of the time lapse. And I'll just click on that. So you'll notice that it's brought up a whole new interface, which allows us to really filter down the archive of satellite images. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to pick out the images that we want to put together in a GIF or to create our time lapse. And all of this is basically filtering down the archive. So we can have one image per orbit or day or week or month or year. You'll notice sometimes that you can't have too many images in one time lapse. So you might have to do one image per week rather than one image per day. For the date range of this, I'm just going to, because we saw before that it was constructed in about 2016, 2017. So I am going to take mine back to about 2018 here, and I'll just select January. And what we have down here, this little slider icon, is a way to restrict the cloudy days that we don't want. So remember how we're looking at a whole archive of satellite images here. What the Sentinel Hub platform has gone ahead and done is to categorize all of the clouds in that so that we can drag this down and start cutting out the percentage rate or percentage value of images that have a certain amount of clouds in them. I like to usually drop this down to about 10% and then click on my search and run the search for satellite images. So I'll do that now. This always does take a little bit of time. As you can imagine, it's searching a lot of images, and we've come up with that same issue of the maximum number of images is 300. So what I can actually do as well is just try and do this per week. And you'll notice that on the left side here, it's starting to bring up my images, and already you can see how different they look with the solar panels in there facing their different directions towards the sun, or in a different easterly or northern direction, depending on which way they're trying to trace that sunlight. It does take some time to load all of these images because, as you can imagine, this is a very large database of satellite imagery taken on every square meter of the world. So going through this is a huge catalog, but it does load eventually. So here we are, we have our time lapse, and what we have down here is a way to alter the speed by frames. So if you can imagine this like a GIF that might be made of 10 or 20 images, we want to speed this up. So if I click on play at 1 frame per second, you'll see how slow that is. Sometimes this is useful if we're just looking at a before and after of perhaps a bombing or a fire that might have happened over a week and we were only looking at 2 different images. It's a great way to do a comparison and contrast. So in one of the previous episodes, we looked at a village that was burnt in Myanmar, and we had a look at a simple before and after to see that change. For this one, the effect we're going for happens over a much longer period of time. So I'm going to bring this up to a 10 speed, so 10 frames per second, and click play on that. And already we can see how the solar panels move over time. We can see some of the directions that they might have, or we can see that some are displayed and some are not. And this is a great case study to show people how time lapses actually work. So if I wanted to include this in a digital report or anything like that, I would click download, and it would simply download a GIF for me to use online or on a website or on any social media platform as well, which is another quite useful feature of this. So another example of creating a time lapse for a different cause is to use, for example, the islands that are popping up in the South China Sea. So this one is called Mischief Reef, which has been quite heavily developed over time. So if we zoom in a little bit closer here on Google Earth, like over the airstrip, for example, and we go back to what this island looked like in 2005 or 2012 even, scroll through a little bit more, you can see that in 2013 there was no real development, there was no vessels around. Go forward in 2015, 2016, there are a couple of vessels around here, and there's something going on like a sand pumping project down here. Go forward a bit more. Oof. There's definitely something popping up there, and also definitely up here as well. So we can see the difference between this one in 2015 and this one in 2016. And then we can see that just develop so much more and grow so much more over time. So we can also visualize that just using Sentinel Hub. So again, I'll grab that those coordinates just through Google Maps. And we can open this up in the EO browser, which I've done here. And again, just going through the processes. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a search for the available imagery in the area. I'm just clicking on this run to view it. So visualize this one. You can see that's what we've got. So we knew that the real production started in between sort of 2015 and 2016. Now our Sentinel-2, if we create a time lapse of this sort of area, I don't think we'll be able to go back that far. So only 2016, possibly not January. So we also have a range of other satellite imagery as well that we could try. We do have Landsat imagery. So we can try the Landsat imagery. That should go back a lot further. So we could try it for this one. And yeah, so we've got 2013. We can do Landsat imagery for. I might just go back to March since that's the earliest one. It's probably going to have to make me do on a weekly basis. Also, the area around here, we noticed just before by looking around, is quite cloudy at certain times of the year. So I might just drop this right back to 10%, and that should be fine for the week count. I'll speed this bit up so that we get this imagery loaded as quickly as possible. Okay, great. So we've loaded our available imagery. It seems to jump forward quite a few days just because of the cloud coverage. You'll notice that even though I've set my cloud coverage rate down to 10%, there are some cloudy days, but the 10% will cover the whole run, probably not just this image. So those independent runs or satellite runs will be covered like that. So I'll do the same thing as what I did last time. I'll set this to a 10 frames per second speed, and we can see the growth of these islands as they were built up. And this island is not the only one in the South China Sea to be built up like this, with a large airstrip and Air Force hangars and a number of sustainable facilities. So it's good to check these things out. But this is a great sort of visualization just to show one of the many islands that have been built up over time in the South China Sea. And again, just like we did last time, we could download this and use this as a GIF in any reporting or anything like that. This also goes to show that we don't just have to rely on the traditional standard recommended satellite imagery, but for this one we use Landsat 8. It's always good to go through and make yourself aware of the type of imagery that's available. In Sentinel Hub EO browser, it also provides a breakdown of what each image or each provider has with its spatial resolution. but also its revisit time. So the revisit time of Sentinel-2 is maximum 5 days to revisit the same area. So it's a great one to create those time lapses with, as well as Landsat as well, which is what we just used there. So the next one I'm going to do is a fun one in the port of Singapore. For those of you that are aware of the port of Singapore, you'll notice that there are a lot of vessels all of the time. It's a very busy area for vessels, specifically cargo and trade in this region. So I thought it might be a nice idea to use this as a case study or an example of creating a image time lapse. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So what I'll do, same process, view in Google Maps. And I think this area has quite a few vessels in it all of the time. So I'll copy those coordinates across into Sentinel Hub EO browser. So we've got our port here, the same view that we always have with Google Maps and we always start with in Sentinel Hub EO browser. For this one, I'm going to choose the Sentinel-1 system. I thought this would be quite interesting to look at to identify the vessels in the port. So I'll just visualize this one and you'll see how different this really looks. So it's loading that run over there. So I might just do a research on that and just make sure we get this run. So you can see already how different that is in comparison to what it looks like if we use, and I'll load the same location in Sentinel Hub Playground. If we use just the normal Sentinel-2 system, we can see how clearly we can see those vessels in the harbor there. I'm just going to leave this on the normal banding that it comes with, but we can also have a look at, for instance, different ways of viewing the Sentinel-1 imagery as well. You can see that there's some quite interesting ways there, or also the enhanced visualization, which makes it quite interesting. So I might even just leave it with the enhanced visualization or the urban SAR visualization as well, and create a time lapse out of this. So same process as before. We just click this play button and that seems like it has them all quite well there. I might just do from 2018 onwards. We can already see when that loads how good that looks just with the vessels. So I'll speed that up as well. And let's check that one out. Yeah, so that looks great. And you can always, just some of the findings you can make out of this. For example, you can see that there is a constant number of vessels always in this pocket here. The traffic route is mainly going through there. We can see that there's a lot of sort of constant number of vessels, but these are always on the move, whereas these ones seem to be more so remaining the same. If we go into further analysis of these, we could always have a look at the difference, for example, between vessels during earlier parts of 2018 and 2019 in comparison to when coronavirus was at its peak, and see if there's a difference in trade or things like that. This is a great way to map out also shipping routes and maybe if there's any congestion lanes. So you can see that this sort of time lapse isn't just great for open source investigations on a human rights or journalism level, but also on trade or business intelligence and corporate research as well. And again, we can download that to have it in a GIF and run that through to either social media. But this was a much more of a niche episode for you on how to create a time lapse. I really appreciate the feedback on all of these episodes, and specifically the liking and sharing of the content. It really keeps me motivated in creating things like this. And if you do find this useful, please do share it around with other colleagues or friends or other professionals that you might have that are looking for content like this. And I look forward to seeing you in the next sessions.